the epitome of nerd culture and the current multi-billion-dollar movie industry that's sweeping across all facets of our culture. The reason for this? A booming movie industry in which millions, dare I say billions of people, are captivated by the adventures of Raisin Man and his latest fashion design. Sorry, rainbow gloves. But comics are not just what appear on the screen. In fact, they've been prevalent across the pages of books and stories that have been written across decades. Comics are an institution that has carried over for generations and generations, appealing to people of all ages because of its characters and prevalent themes. In fact, books written 30 to 40 years ago are just as important as they are now. And this isn't only because of the popularity of the MCU, or dare I say the DCEU. It's because comic books and all they represent provide us, as an audience, a window in which we can view our own world through the lens of fictionalized heroes. So, the conventional mythos of superheroes characterize them in very black and white ways. They're the good guys, right? They bring about order and justice by implementing their superior morality. And this directly parallels real-life events. In fact, that's probably the reason why superheroes are always so popular throughout generations. They're always fighting villains and problems that have a direct correspondence to modern-day problems. In fact, the reason for the rise in popularity of characters like Superman or Captain America in World War II ties directly into America's fear of fascism in Germany and Italy. And the rise in popularity of characters such as Professor X, the X-Men, and Magneto ties directly into many people identifying their struggle to end mutant oppression, like many minority groups trying to end their own oppression in the 1960s. Well, that was easy. Characterizing superheroes seems pretty easy enough. So, what about the supervillains? Well, they're just the opposite of superheroes, right? Does that make them evil? Well, for most of their publication history, yeah, they were the characters that we, as an audience, love to hate. In fact, when they got what they deserved at the end of the story, we feel a sense of satisfaction because of the comeuppance. But as comics transition from the golden era to the silver era to where we are right now, a large portion of this dichotomy that used to exist between superheroes and supervillains isn't there anymore. And this, like I mentioned earlier, directly parallels real-life events. So, let's talk about Batman, who I think is the best superhero in the world. Feel free to disagree with me, I just won't listen to you. All jokes aside, Batman, I feel, fits into the archetype of a superhero really well. I mean, he's the protector of Gotham. He fights against the likes of the Joker, Bane, Poison Ivy, Catwoman, Two-Face, Clayface. I can go on and on with his rogues gallery. But first and foremost, Batman is a protector of lives. He values it almost to a fault, actively going out of his way to protect innocent people and even the people he's fighting. And, I mean, it's kind of a big deal to him. He did lose both his parents when he was really little. And this goes directly into his one moral code of never killing or never using guns, showing his respect for existing societal structures. But the modern-day Batman represents a different kind of hero, one that is almost Machiavellian in a sense. In Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight movie, this is perhaps best exemplified. Spoiler alert, even though this movie came out 10 years ago. Basically, Batman needs to find the Joker, but he doesn't know how. So he hacks into the cell phones he hacks into everyone's cell phone in Gotham City and essentially creates a sonar map in which he can track down the Joker. He and his associates, Lucius Fox, ultimately wields power that no one ever should, behaving in very fascist ways by infringing on our private rights. Yes, he does ultimately achieve his goal, but at the cost of compromising his moral standards. Okay. So let's go back to supervillains. Well, supervillains for a long time have always been portrayed in stories that feature them in very stereotypical roles. They could be conquering the world, robbing a bank, or stealing candy from a baby. It doesn't really matter. But modern-day supervillains are often portrayed in stories that will offer several hundred shades of moral gray. If you found yourself empathizing with supervillains, or agreeing with their critiques on the world, or buying into their logic, well, you really aren't alone. In fact, supervillains can be thought of as charismatic, noble in a sense, because they're the only ones willing to fight against a complacent society. That's why characters like Loki, Killmonger, Thanos, the Joker are not only among the most well-liked villains in modern times, but also among the most well-liked characters. After all, they're the ones fighting against a bloated monarchy, social injustice, economic scarcity, and metropolitan corruption. However, these characters, no matter how romantic their views are still supervillains. They kill, they lie, they extort, they harm innocent people, and that's what makes them the villains. Nevertheless, they still represent the physical blurring of the lines that used to exist between superheroes and supervillains. So, where does this leave us? We're presented with two sides, the superhero and the supervillain. Both extremes, and both opposites in a sense, but at the same time, they represent two sides of the very same coin. And this is a duplicity that we see in our modern world as well. In the land of comics, as well as our own current political and social landscape, we see people who want to achieve their goals, whether it be by bringing order and peace, or by radical and unorthodox methods. All of them trying to achieve what they see in their eyes, a better world. Whether it be Professor X's or Magneto's respective pacifist and militant ways of ending mutant oppression. This directly parallels Martin Luther King's and Malcolm X's respective stances on tackling social injustice. And let's take a look at more modern times as well. Like I mentioned earlier, Batman's mass surveillance program can be thought of as a direct correspondence to similar government programs right now. In fact, sometimes these villains that are combating these fascist tactics. In our modern world of uncertainty and mistrust, it is often within these vigilantes we find heroes, those who are willing to expose social injustices that they believe are perpetrated by figures of authorities. So, the parallels are unquestionable. Now, all that is left to do is decide what we as a society are willing to learn from these comic books, as well as apply to the modern world. I presented two extremes of the superhero and the supervillain, both with their characteristic merits and flaws. So I implore you, as an audience, as people, to learn from both of these. Learn from the ability to empathize. Learn from the ability to treat others with respect via the superheroes, while also chastise them for sometimes being willing to compromise their own moral standards just to achieve their goals. Learn from the willingness to stand up against complacency and oppression from the supervillains, but also know that we should never stoop to their standards. Thank you.